just on Monday, we talked about the fact that the Broncos were dragging their feet a little bit on naming a starting quarterback. It seemed pretty clear to me, especially after how Bo Nix looked in the team's preseason game over the weekend, that he should very clearly be the week 1 starter. But even still then, Sean Payton coming out of it said that he was not ready to name his starting quarterback, which caught me off guard. But now, a few days later, not exactly sure what went on in between then, but Bo Nix is officially going to be the week 1 starter for the Broncos, becoming the first rookie quarterback to be the week 1 starter since John Elway in 1983. So obviously some big shoes to fill in terms of, that individual statistic, but obviously, Bo Nix, the expectation isn't to be John Elway. He just needs to be the guy that Sean Payton believes that he is. And Sean Payton has been very adamant about his confidence level in Bo Nix throughout, from the draft process and on. And supposedly behind the scenes, Sean Payton, who knows if this is just coach speak or if he is being genuine with it, but he has talked about and raved about how impressed he's been with this quarterback room. But ultimately, he had to make the decision at some point, and Bo Nix was the pretty obvious situation. So just following the Broncos practice on Wednesday, he came out and spoke to the media and said, quote, "Bo Nix is going to be our starting quarterback. I felt like, and I said this to the media 2 weeks ago, that room has been outstanding. Stidham, certainly with his experience and then being able to work with Zach Wilson, all 3 of those guys. We've got some decisions as we get into the roster. I don't want to get into all the other roster battles. That's not for today, but Bo will start. We've kind of gone through the process in the very beginning of it all, just speaking with the GM and the owner and understanding that oftentimes these things take care of themselves, but we're not in a hurry to arrive at those types of decisions. We want to see it, think it's important relative to the team that we handle it that way. He's been outstanding. Obviously, there's a ton of room for growth. There's a lot of things that he needs to work on. But ultimately, he's confident in the process with Bo Nix. And as much as he praised Stidham and Zach Wilson, and again, that could be true. That could just be him trying to win over the locker room. Obviously, the vibes at the end of the 2023 campaign for the Broncos were in the dirt with the whole Russell Wilson drama, that maybe he's just trying to win over his players and make sure that locker room is bought into what he is selling. But as much as he can praise Jarrett Stidham, I think that ultimately, when you talk about the Broncos' upcoming season, Stidham we already know to the most part of what he's going to be, and Stidham, I think, can be a very solid backup quarterback. And I'm not saying that Bo Nix clears him out of the water by any means, but it's just that you sort of already know what you have in Stidham, and at this point, there's no real need for the Broncos to play him into the regular season. And the idea is, well, is there a case for Nix sitting the first half of the season for personal benefit? Because Tom Brady, he's even talked about it as of late, that rookies can at sometimes just be thrown into the mix of things and build up bad habits in bad situations and ultimately have their confidence shot and their careers ruined from there, which is very much a true statement. But as for the Broncos, they're obviously not a team that's being expected to make the playoffs, to be all that competitive, but at the same time, it's not an awful roster. The offensive line is solid in front of Bo Nix to the point where it doesn't feel like he's going to be running for his life throughout the entire season. I think they have 2 really good tackles at Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey. The interior is fine as well. It's probably, upper half of the league in terms of strength of an offensive line. So that's obviously a very huge deal in terms of the development of Bo Nix, that I think he doesn't have to just build up bad habits throughout his season. And, the receiving core is definitely weak. I don't feel good about the skill position group. But honestly, at the same time, I don't think that that is going to be anything that totally tears down the confidence level of Bo Nix. Especially, again, confidence is one of the things that Brady talked about. And I think when you have this conversation about Bo Nix in Denver, what stories have you, or reports have you heard come out that would lead you to believe that Sean Payton won't be able to instill confidence in Bo Nix? He compared Bo Nix, at least to some degree. I know not, exactly so, but the report that came out pre-draft process of Sean Payton feels as strongly about Bo Nix that he did about Patrick Mahomes in the 2017 draft. Like, everything I've heard is that, Sean Payton has been very high on Bo Nix. He's made that very clear publicly. And again, if you want to hold the Russell Wilson situation over him last season, I can't say you're wrong to necessarily. That's definitely something that I feel like some players in the locker room at least keep in the back of their minds in terms of how he can treat players disrespectfully, at least just having that as an example. But at the same time, I can't imagine that Broncos locker room was all too bought in on Russell Wilson anyways. And at the end of the day, it's a new season. You have to turn the page on things like that. So I don't think it's going to be anything that's weighing over them. And again, for this specific scenario with Bo Nix, I feel like Sean Payton sort of knows that if he is going to continue to have a future still coaching at this point, Sean Payton, double check the age here, but Sean Payton's getting up there. He had been retired and he decided to come back out to coach the Broncos. He's 60 years old, going to be turning 61 in December. So it's not like he has this, vast future ahead of him in terms of being an NFL coach. He sort of knows that Bo Nix is his path to being able to stay relevant as a coach moving forward. And I just think I'm anticipating at least that relationship between Bo Nix and Sean Payton is going to be really good. I don't think that Payton is going to put Nix in any sort of compromising situations that are going to tear him down. At some point, like obviously for any player, the number one thing I feel like you hear from players going from college football to the NFL is the difference in speed, and the idea of processing that is a little bit of, whiplash to some degree, where it just hits you so fast. But you're going to have to make that adjustment to the next level eventually anyways. And, I think that we saw it even as recent as last year with Jordan Love, who had been sitting on the bench for a few years, and he was a little bit slow out of the gates last season for Green Bay, and ultimately it took that adjustment period. Now maybe him sitting on the bench for a few years, he had at least understood what the process looks like a little bit more anyways, and maybe that did help benefit him to sort of change direction along the way last season, and ultimately turned out a very good year. But I think that for Bo Nix, he's going to be, this is somebody who had a ton of experience in college, a 5-year starter between Auburn and Oregon. So I think he's going to be ready for the moment. I don't think that the moment is going to be too big for him. Now, obviously, the physical limitations are really where people are concerned with him. He's not an elite athlete. He can still move the pocket. He can still scramble. He's not incompetent by any means, but he's not one of the elites at the position. His arm isn't necessarily an incredible talent there, but I feel like as long as mentally the processing, he gets up to speed on that, and having Sean Payton in his ear, I think is going to be massively beneficial for him to that point, that I think he's going to be just fine. And if you look at their schedule as well, the idea of, okay, well, maybe you want to have him sit a little bit, I don't really know what the point of that would have been and when the spot to sort of make that transition would have been. kind of the key spots that I look at. First off, week after the bye week is sort of off the table because the Broncos don't have their bye until week 14. So you really don't want 13 games of experience from Jarrett Stidham. I would have to imagine. I just don't really see what the argument for keeping Stidham in over Nix would be. But if you want to give Nix maybe a few weeks to, fully understand what game week looks like, understanding the routine and all of those things, there were a couple spots that, maybe could have been landing spots for him. I would have said at home, probably, week 5 or 6 against the Raiders and Chargers. Neither one of those teams are excellent. You get it at home, probably not bad. Both division rivals, though, and I feel like especially the Raiders just feel like the team that would have had the attitude of, let's make this kid's debut horrible. So I don't know if that would have been a perfect landing spot. And then I guess the other spot for me would have been week 8. Having a long week. They play Thursday Night Football week 7 in New Orleans, come back home for week 8, 10 days later. Maybe that would have been the time to, have Bo Nix. But then again, at that point, half the season's already gone at that point. And I just don't really know what you are benefiting from with Jarrett Stidham to the point where, again, Stidham's solid. I don't mean to tear him down whatsoever. He's just not really, at least from what I've seen and from I think what most people would agree with, he's not a starting caliber quarterback at this point. And he can definitely, if things go wrong for Bo Nix in year 1, Stidham is somebody that you can probably hand it off to and have him sort of cruise the rest of the way out. But this is a year where it's just going to be about the Broncos retooling, having Bo Nix become the future of the organization. What does that look like in year 1? Time will tell. But let me know what your thoughts were on this whole situation, whether or not you think they got it right. Should they have held Bo Nix out for a longer period of time, or are you on the same wavelength of me in terms of just play the kid, let him get his reps? It's not like you're missing out on anything with putting Jarrett Stidham on the bench. But again, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments section. We're now going to be diving into some of the roster transactions that have taken place in the NFL over the past 24 hours, where we saw this morning 2 division rivals in the Washington Commanders and Philadelphia Eagles make a trade involving a player that was taken in the first round in 2022. So a little bit unprecedented there. And then additionally, the Atlanta Falcons locked down AJ Terrell to a new contract extension. So we will be breaking down both of those news stories. But first, we're going to be taking a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.